Hello everyone, my name is Nilanjan Chatterjee and today we are going to discuss the Regulating Act of 1773. In my previous two videos, I had discussed Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. So if you have missed these two videos, please go and watch my previous two videos so that you'll be able to understand the trajectory that I'm trying to maintain. So, if we talk about socio-economic history of colonial India, it is very important to note that from late 18th century onwards till the end of 19th century, we see a lot of famines in the entire India. Okay. Later in 1790 and early 19th century, that is 1810 and 1820s, till the late of 19th century, we see a lot of famines taking place all across India. Okay, so what were the reasons behind these famines? Okay, one single thing that can be held responsible for these famines was the colonial rule. Okay, why? Because of their land revenue settlements, because of their attitude towards the extraction of revenue from the colonized land, from India. Okay, and also their attitude towards economy in general. Okay, so these famines, on one hand, there were natural reasons behind these famines, but on the other hand, the colonizers were responsible for these famines which took place from late 18th to late 19th century. Okay, so this topic of mine, Regulating Act of 1773, is very important. Why? Because first of all, it indicates a very crucial juncture in Indian history. Basically, the point when the colonizers came and decided to have economic control over India rather than political control, rather than warfare and ousting local rulers by military affairs, etc. They sort of focused more on economic control over India. And that is why Regulating Act of 1773 is important. Okay. As we can see in the very first slide of ours, the background and necessity of the Regulating Act. Okay, so it is important because as we can see in the very first point, the rise of the East India Company. Okay, the rise of the East India Company. By mid-18th century, the rise of the East India Company had transformed from a trading organization to a more organized political power. Okay, as we have seen in our previous videos, the colonizers, particularly the British East India Company, looked forward to making political control over Bengal, Bihar, Orissa and some parts of southern peninsula, that is in Carnatic region. Okay, we have already discussed all these things. So in 1765, okay, Bengal, Bihar and Orissa got completely under the dominance, came under the dominance of the colonial rule. Okay, and the dual government system was established. Okay, the company's dual government system actually disabled the local authority of these areas, Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. And since these areas were extremely prominent, okay, in colonial period, it affected the entire India in terms of economic and social affairs. Okay, the third point, which is probably the most important point, is the British monopoly over trading activities. Now, the company, okay, the East India Company paid 40,000 to the government of Britain, okay, to the government of Britain on for trading purposes. Okay, so by 1768, okay, the English East India Company lost some of its major trading monopolies over American region. Okay, and they needed to compensate. Okay, And that is why the British government had to impose certain orders on the English East India Company so that they can manage the deficit, okay, that has already happened in America. Okay, so some kind of surveillance and orders were imposed on the English East India Company by the British government, okay, and that directly affected the Regulating Act of 1773. Who is being regulated in this Regulating Act? It is basically the English East India Company, regulated by the British government. So the provisions of the Regulating Act. The first thing that I am going to mention is the Governor General. It is very important, as the act by Prime Minister Lord North. Lord North, please remember, Lord North was the Prime Minister of Britain who introduced the Regulating Act of 1773. Established the office of the Governor General of Bengal with oversight extending to Madras and Bombay. Okay, so it means who happened to be the Governor of Bengal, okay, now had the ultimate authority over these two other presidencies. One is Madras and the other one is Bombay. Okay, so if Warren Hastings is the Governor of Bengal, he automatically gets the control over territories like Madras and Bombay. I think it is understandable. So let's come to the next slide. Also, the Governor General was assisted by a council of 4 members. Now, before I come to this topic in detail, the Governor General, okay, this term was a new invention by the Regulating Act of 1773. Why? Because before the Act of 1773, it was only governor, okay? It was only governor that was there, okay? After the 1773 Act, the Governor of Bengal became the Governor General of Bengal, which automatically, being the Governor General of Bengal, automatically upheld the position of that person to the Governor General of both Madras and Bombay, okay? And this Governor General was assisted by a council of members, particularly Lieutenant General John Clavering, George Monson, Richard Barwell, and Philip Francis. These were the 4 council of members who used to assist the Governor General after the 1773 Act. As we can see in the next slide, it is also an important provision of this regulatory act, that is, a Supreme Court was established in 1774 to ensure justice within company territories. Okay, so since company has already established a politico-economic order over India, it needs a court to legitimize its political authority and economic authority. And that is why the Supreme Court was established in 1774, which was the Supreme Court of Bengal. Okay, because Bengal was the main presidency of the colonizers. And the second point, another point regarding the provisions of the act was the jurisdiction. Okay, the court, okay, according to the act, had jurisdiction over British subjects, company officials, and most controversially, Indians in specific cases. Okay, so on one hand, you are talking about maintaining and organizing the East India Company. On the other hand, you are creating certain jurisdictional orders so that you can penalize Indian people. Okay, so this was the innate duality, okay, of this regulatory act or regulating act of 1773. Okay, and a very important point is the Parliamentary on Oversight. Okay, the act required the company to submit regular reports on its revenue and administration to the British government. As I've already said, that the company was basically liable. Okay, the British government didn't want the company to go out of their hands. Okay, they want the company to be absolutely subjected to the commands of the British government. Okay, and that is apparently why the Regulating Act was passed. And another important provision is that to prevent financial mismanagement, that I already mentioned what happened in America in 1768. To prevent the financial mismanagement, the act limited the dividend of the company, okay, could pay to its shareholders to 6% annually until its debts were cleared. Okay, so this was another important feature of the provision of the act. Okay, and the last 2 points, as we can see, the anti-corruption measures and the revenue administration. Anti-corruption measures means the act assured, okay, it ensured that not a single company official, okay, not a single company officer can engage with the native trading organizations for their own economic or monetary benefits. Okay, everything that the East India Company will do or will have, okay, it will be entirely in favor of the British government. Okay, there will be no personal connections between a company official and a third party or some trading organizations, some local trading organizations of India. Okay, or they can not extort money from the local traders or local money makers of India. Okay, and a strong revenue administration was also promised. The Governor General and Council were tasked with overseeing revenue policies in Bengal. Reforms included the appointment of district collectors to streamline revenue collection so that the margin of error gets less. Okay, once you have a strong revenue administrative system, a strong revenue administration, you have less chance of getting bankrupt. Okay, because more and more money is coming regularly. Okay, that influx of money was the thing that the British government was looking for. Okay, particularly from the British East India Company, the English East India Company. Okay, but there were some challenges. Okay, particularly in regards in regards with the implementation. Okay, that is, the Governor General's Council was often paralyzed by internal disputes. Okay, particularly here we'll talk about Philip Francis. Okay, as we know, he was one of the members, one of the 4 members of the council, and he stood against Warren Hastings, who was the governor or the Governor General of Bengal after the Regulating Act of 1773. Warren Hastings, since he was the Governor General of Bengal, he was countered by Philip Francis, as Philip Francis believed that there were some monetary problems that were taking place because of Warren Hastings, and there are some kind of forgery or unspecific monetary exchanges between Warren Hastings and some third parties. Okay, and the second point is judicial confusion. Okay, the Supreme Court's undefined jurisdiction led to clashes with local authorities and the company's administrative framework. Okay, because we know that since we have a politico-administrative body like Supreme Court, we can't serve the interest of all the different groups of people. So different interest groups were having different political and social problems, okay, in response to the Regulating Act of 1773. And finally, economic exploitation. As I've told you that economic exploitation became a huge thing. Okay, economic exploitation became a big thing after the Regulating Act of 1773. Why? Because the British East India Company was trying to make some stable ground for monetary benefits. Okay, and who were the ones who suffered the most? Of course, the peasants. They were at the bottom of the pyramid, so they suffered the most because of these changes in the revenue administration led by the English East India Company vis-a-vis the British. Okay, the legacy, we have come to the ending part, the concluding part of our discussion. The legacy of the Regulating Act of 1773 is that it promised of a centralized administration governed by the Britishers. Don't forget, it is not about an Indian administration. It is not about following some local rulers or something. Okay, a centralized administration run by the Britishers. Okay, judicial reforms, because there was no court as such before the Supreme Court was built in 1774. So that was a big step taken by the Britishers. And accountability. Okay, accountability of the peasants. Okay, the rural people, the people living in the rural areas, the different communities, okay, who are involved in different modes of production. Okay, so everyone was accountable under this Act of 1773, because the main intention of this act was to maximize the revenue and the profit for the company. And only then, if the company was able to get maximum amount of revenue, only then, okay, they will somehow manage to fulfill that deficit, okay, that took place in 1770s because of their lost territories in America and some other economic problems that also the Great Britain was facing that moment. Okay, and the Regulating Act marked significant shift in the British control in India, moving from a primarily commercial enterprise towards a colonial administration. Okay, and as a result of the Regulating Act, we can't say that the Regulating Act was an absolute decision taken by the British East India Company. Rather, it was reformed in the form of Pitt's India Act in 1784. We will discuss that later. So in 1784, in the Pitt's India Act, another Privy Council was introduced to assist, okay, the Council of Members, okay, who were basically already assisting the Governor General. Okay, so we will discuss that later. As I have told you, the Pitt's India Act of 1784, it was a corrected version of the Regulating Act of 1773. That is it for today. In the next day, we'll come up with a new topic. Hope you like it. Please don't forget to share your thoughts. Feel free to comment and let us know about your feelings. Okay? Thank you very much.